broadcasting house in London, World Business Report.
Will an historic new trade pact bring Africa a step closer to the dream of a single market? And a lighter shaking of salt why New York could become the first US city to require labels on high sodium dishes in restaurants. Welcome to World Business Report. I'm Susannah Streeter. Today, a potentially big change in the way Africa does business will be announced. Many industries have been frustrated with the difficulties of trading across the continent, with tariffs and patchy infrastructure a barrier to commerce. But with the launch of the tripartite free trade area, 3 regional trading blocs will be brought together, spanning 26 countries from Egypt in the north to South Africa in the south, via Kenya in East Africa. The main aim will be to create a larger market with fewer trade barriers on most goods, making them cheaper and stimulating potentially $1 trillion worth of economic activity across the region. According to one report, the average time needed to clear goods through customs in Africa is 1 month versus 10 days in Europe. Well, we're going to be speaking about this just now with our guest on the programme today, who's Manji Chito, Vice President of Teneo Intelligence and Analyst. Thank you very much for coming to the programme today. So tell me more about this very historic agreement. Do you think it will make a real difference to trade in Africa?
Well, I mean, I think that's too early to say, but I think the most important part of this is that effectively it's African governments responding to the criticism for decades of not doing enough to raise the intra-African trade, which, as you said, accounts for 12% of the volume of trade in the region. But there are still huge barriers that need to be addressed. I mean, things like institutional capacity of customs. I mean, you mentioned already, one of the biggest things that companies face, particularly retailers who try to trade across the region, is actually getting goods through as quickly as possible. If you think about the storage issues as well, it's important to be able to get goods across the region very quickly. With 26 countries, that's going to prove incredibly challenging.
There's a big elephant in the room, though, isn't there? Because the West African bloc of countries isn't signing up to this trade deal. Why is that?
Well, I mean, at the moment, you know, we can only speculate as to why West African bloc has not joined, but the West African bloc did sign up its own major agreement this year, which began the Common External Tariff, which effectively brings together and harmonizes all the different tariff bands in the region to 5 major tariff bands. So theoretically, there is now a common market in West Africa. But again, similar to the current challenges, West Africa will face those, the non-tariff barriers that exist, institutional capacities of customs. That is going to be a big problem. The infrastructure, of course, that's again another major challenge.
So the will is there, they're signing up to this big agreement, but there are 26 countries involved. They're going to be really approaching it differently depending on the governments and depending on the bureaucracy that they've got to get through.
Well, I mean, that has always even been the biggest challenge to trade in Africa, right? A lot of the bigger countries which actually their manufacturing output is a lot better. A lot of the smaller countries feel slightly suspicious that their markets will get flooded with goods from these countries. So I suspect that what we might see as part of these agreements is certain level of protectionism, which has already existed on the West African bloc trade agreements.
OK, well, Manji Chito, thank you very much for joining us from Teneo Intelligence on that story. Now, how do you turn around an airline that was struggling financially even before it suffered 2 major airline disasters within the space of 6 months? Well, that's the task facing the new CEO of Malaysia Airlines, Christophe Muller. He told Michelle Fleury about how the old, technically bankrupt airline will be scrapped entirely and replaced with a new, slimmed-down company.
Well, there is every day more news. We try to settle swiftly, but at full satisfaction of everybody involved, the next of kin. That is, for example, something where also our new company will step into the obligations and duties of the old co, so nothing to be feared about. The team will remain in place. We keep our hotlines open. We take good care of everything which is related to these 2 events.
Can the brand be saved after such terrible tragedies?
We have researched that with 14 agencies worldwide. We ask all our customers worldwide, and the answers are very different by market. We have certain markets where the brand has taken absolutely no damage. Malaysia is one of them. But we have markets where, people are just associating every day our name with a tragedy. And we can simply not ignore that. We cannot swim against the stream. It's not just the name of the airline, but it's sometimes the logo, sometimes it's the code. So we study that very careful. We haven't finished the debate yet, but one thing we made sure from moment number one, we involve our customers in that debate, both domestically and abroad, to find the best solution for the question you just asked.
Now, a high salt intake is linked to a raft of health problems. Now, New York City may become the first in the US to require warning labels about high sodium content on menus in chain restaurants. For more on this, let's go straight to Samira Hussain, who's at the New York Stock Exchange. So, Samira, yet another reprint for menus could be on the cards. What are restaurants saying?
Well, of course, the restaurant industry is pushing back against this, as they have any time New York City has tried to implement a law that sort of looks at how much people are taking in terms of sugar or salt in this case. What they really want is chain restaurants. So that's restaurants that have more than 15 locations. They would have to put a small little icon on menu items that have more than 2,300 milligrams of sodium in it. Now that's just at the daily requirement. So you would basically be getting your full day's requirement of sodium in one serving. It's about equivalent to a teaspoon of salt. But of course, people in the industry say that that's a really bad idea. But if you're looking at the effects of sodium on people, I mean, it could lead to heart attacks and high blood pressure. And so that's a real concern, which is why you see the city of New York trying to put that through.
But how likely is it to go through? Because, of course, the city tried to ban supersized sodas, and that didn't work, did it?
No, it didn't. And the city has a bit of a reputation of trying to put forth these kinds of rules. I mean, now they have rules about putting on the calorie counts on menu items. So they have been successful in some instances. In other instances, they haven't been. It's interesting that the current mayor is using the same tactics that the former mayor used when he was trying to put through that soda ban, and that didn't work. So we'll have to wait and see what happens with the sodium.
Okay, Samira Hussain, thank you very much for talking to us. In other news now, just 2 days after announcing the launch of its music streaming service, an investigation has been launched into Apple Music deals with record labels. Competition authorities are looking into allegations that Apple urged labels to drop support for the free advertising-supported rivals, a move that could be seen as anti-competitive. Brazil will invest $65 billion in infrastructure building to help boost its flagging economy. The country plans to award private sector contracts to construct and operate nearly 7,000 kilometres of roads, as well as 4 large airports and a number of ports and railways. It's that time in the programme when we take a look at what's been happening on the financial markets. And as you can see, the FTSE 100, the index of the top 100 companies listed on the London Stock Exchange, has done pretty well today. It's recovered gains from recent days, up by over 1% there. The DAX in Frankfurt also up by more than 2%. There really is a much more sentiment around about more encouraging news for the Eurozone, which really has lifted the markets. And the markets in the United States has taken a lead from Europe. We see the Dow Jones also up 1.43%, and the tech-heavy Nasdaq also up by 1.31%. And that really is because technology stocks are doing well. That's all from World Business Report for now. More later.
In a Football Focus special, we speak to Arsenal's Alexis Sanchez and travel to Chile to meet those closest to him. One man's journey from poverty to global football stardom. That's Alexis Sanchez Uncovered, from Devil's Corner to Wembley Way. This weekend, only on BBC World News.
It's 6 a.m. here in Singapore.
And it's 11 p.m. here in London. Bringing you the latest local and international news and in-depth analysis of the day's top business stories.
Wake up to Newsday
on BBC World News.
I absolutely love shooting my own material, especially if it's a small handycam, so I'll hold it about there and I'm looking directly at the person. It's a real fly on the wall approach and the camera becomes an extension of me. I'm Yalda Hakim. Join me on BBC World News.
Kidnap threats, suicide bombings, lots of places I go are described as dangerous. But when I go there, the danger is not uppermost in my mind. It's my real desire to be there, to find out what's happening. It's a story we really should tell. I'm Lise Doucette. Join me on BBC World News.
Global Minds is an online community that gives you the opportunity to tell us what you think about the BBC's international news services. Register now, bbcglobalminds.com. Tell us what you think and make the BBC what you want it to be.
Stay up to speed with the fast-moving world of science. Download the BBC Horizons app now. You can find out more about the research shaping the latest trends, enjoy reports from every series of Horizons, and discover how different technologies are being applied across the globe.
Catch up with all the latest sports news and results from around the globe, now on BBC World News in Sport Today.